I have a confession to make. Sometimes I can get a little sidetracked when working on a game, especially if it's for a game jam. Today I'll talk about a prime example of this, a little jam that I hosted for my friends called the Try Something New Island Jam. We'll talk about a few failed attempts along the way and how I ended up making a Metroidvania game in only 48 hours. So get ready to set sail and let's get started. Our voyage begins in May of 2020, and I had the random urge to make a tropical themed game jam. Now, I didn't really want to have the stress and pressure of actually competing in a real game jam, so I thought I'll just host it and I'll have some of my friends do it and it'll be a fun little exercise. Now, the jam was only 1 week long because I didn't want to make a game that was super big. Also, the purpose of the jam was to try something different, try something new that you've never done before. Whether it's a game engine, an art style, or a genre, just do something that's, a little out of your comfort zone. So I began to brainstorm and think about what I could do for my island game. One of my favorite shows is Survivor Man, where Les Stroud tries to stay out in the wild and survive for a full week. And I thought to myself, that would be a really fun game where you just have to stay in an island and survive for 1 week's time. Basically Hand Simulator without the hands and without the creepy loincloths. Also, since the theme of the jam was to try something different, I decided to use Unity because I don't use it a whole lot and the support for 3D is relatively good. So feeling inspired and motivated with my idea, I downloaded Unity, started making some 3D models, and of course, watched some Brachy tutorials. Now, if you read the title of this video, you probably are wondering why I'm talking about a 3D survival game. And that's because after a couple days of having a blast working with Unity, making some crazy art, like look at this crab guy, what is this? Why did I give him those? But I fell into the trap that most survival games do. I try to make this crazy open-ended game instead of it being like this little thing where you're just trying to survive a couple nights and collect resources. And even though I had a blast working on the project, I knew it was time for me to abandon ship and try something different. At this point in the jam, we only had 48 hours left, and I was starting to panic because I really did want to make a game, and that was the whole point of doing this jam in the first place. And since I technically tried something new with Unity, I decided, you know what, I'll use Construct 3 and try to make a game super fast. Now, another bad idea came to mind that ended up actually working out. I thought to myself, what if I made a Metroidvania, and not just a Metroidvania? What if it's Sky Pirates, and the island is in the sky? Not only that, but what if the character is like a bird or a duck thing, whatever this is, and has a sword instead of a gun like a typical Metroidvania? So getting some fresh wind in my sails, I decided to push forward and try to see if I could make this game in under 48 hours. And this time I tried to limit myself and think about what is the core gameplay, what are you trying to do? And I figured that you would play as this duck guy, you would land with your airship, you would have to find a key to get to the boss or an ability. Once you found it, you could go fight the boss, who would be this crazy crab guy. I don't know what my obsession with crabs was this jam, but I just needed to add them. And after you fight the boss, that's it. That's all it was. It was like a little demo or a preview of a bigger game if I wanted to flesh it out. So I thought that was a little bit more reasonable and realistic, especially because Construct 3 is incredibly easy to create games. So I began with making artwork. In my personal opinion, if you make the artwork first, it kind of makes the rest of the game easier because you have an idea what the UI, the menus, the characters, and the enemies, how everything's going to look before you even program it. It also helps because if you start programming your game and you make this cool art style and you do this thing, and then you realize, oh crap, I need to make a boss and I can't make the boss in the art style I want, it's better to find that out earlier than to make a really disgusting looking boss because it's a little too hard for you to do. So I played around with some styles and I ended up going with something relatively small. If you make smaller pixel art, you tend to make a smaller game. For the most part. So now that I had all the art and visuals for my game, it was time for me to put it all together, but the clock was ticking. I quickly built out the platforming and the movement. Then I focused on making this sword attack and making it so you could jump, slice underneath you, above you. Then after that, I knew it was important to start laying out the levels, even before I created enemies. I roughly blocked out kind of how I want the map to look. I wanted you to move to the left at first, find a key or a power up, and then move to the right where the boss is at. After that, I finished up creating the enemies and also making the boss, who was an absolute blast to make and is actually really hard. Now, I'm not gonna lie that I was pretty stressed towards the end here. Even though it just was a small jam, I really wanted to finish this in time and I was worried that I wasn't going to. Ultimately, I had to scale back some stuff, especially the map, because I didn't have a whole lot of time to do level design. But somehow I was able to actually finish and submit the game with actually a couple hours to spare. Overall, I was really happy with the game that I made. I did find the next morning that there was a game-breaking glitch where you can't get to the boss for some reason. It's only on the Windows version, which is really strange to me. For some reason, the glitch is still happening, so I'm going to put it in web browsers so that you guys can play it and experience it for yourself. Now, this is definitely not a polished or a great game by any means. I was able to add a few things, like I said, the boss fight, which is one, and an intro cutscene. But the coolest part was I learned so much from this jam. Messing around with Unity and making that weird survival game, plus trying to make a game in 2 days in Construct, you learn and you get way more efficient at things. The principles and the engine that I actually created for this jam, I ended up using for a version of Dewdrop, specifically the one that had the built-in level editor. So my advice for anyone that is trying to do a smaller jam and they find that they get distracted, sometimes it's okay to get a little sidetracked. It's okay to restart an idea, as long as you're learning from it. To be honest, some of the best learning experiences I've ever had were from games that I never finished, because you're practicing different principles, and even if you don't use it for that final game, you'll apply it to something else that you will finish. So if you do struggle with not finishing your game or jumping from project to project, that's okay. It's okay to learn, but make sure that every once in a while that you are finishing things, it's good for you, and you learn quite a bit from it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on which game was better, ideas that you would implement yourself, or maybe better time management skills. Make sure to let me know in the comments down below. Also, a huge shout out to Buddy Games, James Kennedy, and Rybread, and the rest of the amazing Patreon supporters that help make these videos possible. If you like these types of videos, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for another game dev adventure.